65 agonizing days into the hunt for Nancy Guthrie, a massive bombshell just dropped out of nowhere. The gossip giant TMZ claims another extortion letter just hit their desk, complete with chillingly precise demands that I will break down shortly. Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie finally returned to her anchor chair this morning after her mother vanished without a trace. My mind immediately goes to the timing. Could this supposed extortion demand surfacing on the exact morning Savannah resumes her broadcast duties actually be a random fluke? Honestly, the authenticity of these demands remains highly questionable, especially since previous letters felt entirely fabricated and sensationalized by the tabloids. Before diving into the actual text, we have to consider if seeing the daughter back on national television acted as a trigger. Did her public reappearance reignite obsession around the investigation, or push the culprit into taking a reckless new course of action? That persistent suspicion has been gnawing at me, leaving me waiting for a sudden breakthrough to happen today. We will circle back to that explosive tabloid letter momentarily. Right now, let us acknowledge Savannah bravely stepping back onto the morning broadcast set. Expressing deep gratitude for the overwhelming outpouring of public support, she greeted viewers with a simple standard, "Welcome to begin the work week." She mentioned feeling relieved to be back in her familiar element. Dressed in bright yellow, she eventually ventured out to the plaza to interact with the crowd, taking photos alongside supporters holding up cheerful greeting banners. The missing woman and the ongoing police hunt were never explicitly brought up on air, though the underlying emotional weight of her return was impossible to miss. Enduring this nightmare required immense courage, and her resilience throughout this grueling ordeal has been nothing short of awe-inspiring. Now let us dissect that breaking news alert. Let me share the specifics I jotted down regarding this newly reported extortion message. The outlet claims an individual has been relentlessly reaching out to them, explicitly using the word relentless. This latest correspondence reportedly claimed to possess exact coordinates for both the perpetrator and the victim's remains. The sender demanded half a cryptocurrency coin in exchange for these vital answers. The publication emphasized this source's extreme persistence, noting prior communications where the author adamantly denied any direct involvement in the actual crime. Claiming to have been abroad when the abduction occurred, the tipster insists they still hold the key to finding the captive and the culprit. Tabloid founder Harvey Levin confirmed turning this correspondence straight over to federal agents. He publicly stated that his gut instinct strongly suggests this anonymous informant might actually be legitimate. Clearly, he refuses to brush this lead aside. Levin pointed out a distinct shift in the sender's tone. Early emails stressed extreme urgency, while recent ones claimed the deadline no longer mattered. This timeline shift bolsters the theory that the initial message arrived during a critical window. The informant likely believed the victim was breathing during the first contact, only to realize she had perished by the second. I remain deeply cynical about these media-driven claims. Are we just feeding trolls hungry for the spotlight? Each new letter generates massive traffic and flashy headlines for the network. Yet we cannot ignore the bizarre synchronicity of this threat emerging the exact same morning the anchor reclaims her morning television post. Levin trusting his intuition about this mysterious source adds a fascinating layer to the puzzle. We must also recall the daughter's recent interview, where she shockingly admitted to viewing at least 2 earlier extortion demands as credible threats. That unexpected confession totally threw me off guard during the broadcast. My assumption was that the family dismissed every single message as a cruel hoax, yet she firmly stood by the validity of 2 specific letters. Now, this fresh development drops from the tabloids simultaneously with her highly publicized return to the studio. Bringing his expertise to the show is Joe Giacalone, a former police sergeant from New York. With decades spent tackling unsolved mysteries and intense criminal probes, his insight is invaluable. Welcome to the discussion, Joe. I truly value your time today. Glad to be here with you, Brian. Let us dive right into the breaking news that just surfaced this afternoon regarding the latest blackmail correspondence acquired by the media. My doubts run deep whenever tabloids push these extortion angles purely for clickbait. However, reviewing their latest claims, the founder explicitly trusted his gut instinct about this repeat correspondent. This relentless informant denies snatching the victim, but swears he can pinpoint both the murderer and the hidden remains. How do you interpret this bizarre scenario from a tactical standpoint? Detectives are obligated to chase down every single thread, no matter how flimsy. Personally, I view these financial demands with extreme prejudice from day one, as this entire setup defies every established precedent taught at the Academy. Following these leads is simply standard operating procedure for the squad. They are essentially running parallel probes right now, separating random opportunistic grifters from legitimate domestic or stranger abductions. Extraneous noise plagues nearly every high-profile manhunt on the books. This is merely another distraction forcing investigators to divert critical resources, potentially burning precious hours on a wild goose chase. Regarding the daughter resuming her morning television duties today, I always suspected her eventual reappearance might trigger a noticeable shift in the case dynamics. Could her broadcast presence shake a fresh witness loose, or perhaps provoke a deranged stalker into firing off another threatening message? The synchronization of her ending a 2-month hiatus and a new tabloid threat dropping is undeniably suspicious. What is your professional take on this coincidence? Keeping in mind, she had to resume normalcy eventually. Years ago, at a grisly crime scene, a fellow officer bluntly reminded me that the world keeps spinning regardless of tragedy. Finding a way to carry on is inevitable, and diving back into her daily routine is undoubtedly the wisest move. Restoring a structured life and doing the job she adores is vital for her psychological survival, right now. Sitting idle would only let the agonizing uncertainty of the unresolved police probe completely consume her sanity. The sheer terror of not knowing her mother's fate carries an unimaginable emotional toll. Most of us cannot even begin to fathom the sheer agony of navigating such a horrific waking nightmare. Do you believe there is a genuine connection between the newly delivered threat and her high-profile media return today? Personally, I highly doubt they are truly intertwined. However, an opportunistic troll seeking 15 minutes of fame would absolutely weaponize her return to the spotlight to amplify their own twisted games. My greatest hope is that detectives unmask this anonymous author to verify their claims once and for all. With a 7-figure bounty on the line, people will do anything for a payout. Judging by your cadence, you sound incredibly dismissive of these written demands. Absolutely. I have considered the financial extortion angle to be total garbage since day one. They already busted one con artist attempting to exploit the tragedy for a quick payday. If this scenario were authentic, Brian, it would shatter every known protocol for handling kidnapping demands, primarily because the culprits bypass the relatives entirely. Routing demands through tabloid journalists is a completely unprecedented and baffling maneuver. The entire premise feels entirely backward. Traditional abductions revolve around a safe exchange, yet a hostage return never seemed like the actual endgame here. Furthermore, investigators have never received a single shred of evidence confirming the captive is still breathing. Nobody is wiring digital currency into the void without solid verification. Despite public misconceptions about cryptocurrency being completely anonymous, digital ledgers leave a highly visible trail. Highly trained cyber experts possess the exact tools needed to hunt down those elusive transactions. Federal agents are undoubtedly tearing through those digital footprints right this very second. My initial assumption was that every threat was fabricated until the daughter openly admitted on television that a couple of the demands felt terrifyingly real. That shocking revelation made me completely reevaluate the situation. If she believes they are authentic federal investigators likely fed her that intelligence, meaning we might actually be dealing with a legitimate captor. To be fair, federal authorities notoriously withhold critical case details from grieving relatives to protect the probe. They likely just handed over the heavily redacted files without providing full context. Listen, a killer tip might just be sitting there, but detectives still have to tear apart every single detail to verify the facts. Cops are never going to stand at a podium and declare this lead is pure garbage, so we are completely ignoring it. Investigators walk a tightrope between managing public expectations and proving their dedication to the hunt. The message is basically, we hear you loud and clear. Whether this holds water remains a mystery, but our squad will chase down these shadows until we uncover the absolute truth. That internal dialogue was undoubtedly echoing through the precinct hallways behind closed doors. Absolutely. Now we just have to sit back and watch how these mysterious letters actually pan out. Honestly, part of me questions whether TMZ just smells a viral scoop whenever a random message drops. Though to their credit, they claim the feds are receiving every piece of correspondence now. I have to ask you something specific about this whole situation, Joe. Look, well over 60 days have officially vanished without a single solid update. Given your extensive background hunting down unsolved mysteries, though I certainly hesitate to label this investigation completely frozen, just yet, how would you tackle this exact dossier if it suddenly landed on your desk today? Honestly, Brian, the answer is crystal clear to me. My absolute first move would involve establishing a massive, fully global operation. Unsolved homicide unit, and my strategy requires dragging in local units from a 100-mile radius surrounding the incident zone. Every single department needs a seat at that table. Naturally, bringing heavy hitters from the federal level is mandatory, especially the Drug Enforcement Administration. Critics might argue, what makes you so certain? Why involve narcotics agents? The answer is simple. The southern border is practically right next door. Those federal operatives absolutely possess deep undercover networks and secret local contacts down there who could blow this entire mystery wide open. Another aggressive tactic involves extensively interviewing every single suspect hauled into custody across that entire 100-mile territory. Detectives need to squeeze them for whispers regarding our victim. Freshly sentenced inmates are incredibly vulnerable during those initial 7 days behind bars, making them prime targets for interrogation. Honestly, there is a huge chance they hold crucial puzzle pieces. Investigators simply must infiltrate the underground spaces where these criminals congregate and share secrets. You have to exploit their shady networks and actively squeeze those relationships until someone finally spills the beans. Trading knowledge for freedom is the ultimate bargaining chip. As mentioned previously, staring down a reward exceeding $1 million without generating a single viable lead is a massive red flag. That silence strongly suggests deep involvement from a sinister criminal syndicate operating completely beneath our current radar. The entire community remains completely tight-lipped about the situation. However, my decades wearing a badge taught me an undeniable truth. Eventually, a desperate convict staring at concrete walls reaches a breaking point, thinking, enough is enough. I hold the keys and I desperately need my freedom. That is when the plea bargaining begins. Your perspective aligns perfectly with a buddy of mine in uniform. He operates strictly as a standard patrolman, fairly new to the force, not a seasoned investigator by any means. During a recent catch-up session regarding the Nancy Guthrie tragedy, his thoughts mirrored yours exactly. He confidently predicted the ultimate breakthrough would stem from a penitentiary informant. When pushed on his reasoning for such a bold claim, he simply shrugged off the question, admitting he lacked hard evidence. His gut instinct strongly screams that an incarcerated individual will eventually surrender the golden ticket. Frankly, milking the prison population remains a bread-and-butter strategy for detectives attempting to resurrect heavily stagnant files. When investigators are actively digging through horrifying mysteries that have collected dust for 20 or 30 years, those forgotten inmates are usually your only viable witnesses. Seriously grilling offenders during initial booking is strictly essential. Their specific charges are completely irrelevant. A suspect's rap sheet can be miles long, and facing decades behind bars makes them eager to trade prison yard gossip. I would gladly accept a wild ghost story over absolute silence any day. Naturally, detectives must rigorously authenticate those whispers, but a breadcrumb is still a breadcrumb. Eventually, investigators must hit the pavement, aggressively rattle some cages, and manufacture their own lucky breaks. Watching agencies passively wait on potential genetic evidence drives me crazy. The harsh reality is simple. Your hands are totally empty until lab results return. That is the cardinal rule. Furthermore, receiving those scientific reports guarantees absolutely nothing regarding their actual courtroom value. Separating complex biological profiles is incredibly tricky, leaving too many variables up to chance. Detectives need to abandon their comfortable desks right now. Hit the gritty streets, start kicking down doors, and force a legitimate breakthrough. Modern policing absolutely possesses the resources for this aggressive strategy. If dozens of neighboring jurisdictions relentlessly rattle cages simultaneously, a crucial clue inevitably shakes loose. Your earlier point regarding the southern border is fascinating. The constant minimization of a potential cross-border connection completely baffles me. From day one, officials aggressively pushed a narrative claiming zero ties existed to our southern neighbors. Authorities on the other side of that international boundary echoed the exact same dismissive sentiment immediately. Geographically speaking, the proximity is undeniably dangerous. Driving directly from Nancy's residence to the crossing took me roughly 90 minutes. Hitting green lights the whole way cuts that transit window down even further. Blindly dismissing a foreign escape route just feels incredibly naive to me. The math simply does not add up. Completely ruling out that escape vector is a massive tactical error. A seasoned investigator never shuts any doors prematurely. Keep in mind, official press briefings from the precinct are essentially carefully crafted illusions. Police commanders are absolute masters at talking for 20 minutes without actually revealing a single tangible fact. Hearing them declare suspects innocent means absolutely nothing. Until the gavel bangs, everyone remains under the microscope. Primarily, leadership desperately wants to prevent widespread panic from swallowing the community. Maintaining a false sense of security often lulls the actual perpetrator into making a catastrophic slip-up. Consequently, smart cops refuse to publicly paint a target on anyone's specific back during ongoing inquiries. However, ignoring the potential of a cross-border flight is just plain foolishness. This theory does not automatically imply heavy cartel involvement or organized narcotics rings. It simply highlights a glaringly obvious getaway route. Interestingly, a fugitive fleeing internationally is a massive blessing in disguise. The second a suspect breaches a state or national boundary, the heavy-hitting federal agencies instantly assume total control. Truthfully, handing the reins over to national authorities was my dream scenario. Having the big dogs confidently declare, "We are running the show," changes everything. Federal operatives constantly hover out of sight anyway. Collaborating with federal agents was a staple of my career, and Hollywood completely exaggerates the turf wars. The reality is a highly productive, mutually beneficial partnership, and my personal network is full of incredible national investigators. Unfortunately, the rumblings hitting our ears lately paint a much darker picture behind the scenes. While the exact dynamics unfolding down in that county remain murky, a jurisdictional clash would be a tragic disservice to the victim. Absolutely. My trusted insiders initially reported some massive ego battles erupting between the National Bureau and the hometown deputies. Rumor has it local brass intentionally hoarded crucial intelligence. The top cop supposedly nurses an ancient grudge against federal oversight, creating massive early friction. Thankfully, cooler heads eventually formed the current strike team. Word on the street suggests the operational flow is incredibly smooth these days. The toxic rivalry evaporated entirely. The spotlight shifted away from upper management, allowing the actual boots on the ground to seamlessly integrate with their federal counterparts. My network confirms the bureaucratic nightmare is officially dead and buried. Fingers crossed those rumors hold true. However, bickering over imaginary boundaries already torched critical, early investigation windows. You have to wonder if this newfound harmony is genuine or simply a forced ceasefire. Did the media spotlight simply shame them into playing nice once the power struggle leaked to the press? If public outrage was the only catalyst for cooperation, congratulations on doing the bare minimum. A seasoned professional cannot help but look at that circus and loudly question their collective sanity. Watching this specific inquiry unfold leaves me utterly baffled at every single turn. My running gag is that I would rip my own hair out if I was not already bald. Releasing control of the primary incident location so quickly is a textbook example of mind-boggling incompetence. Surrendering that bloody property made zero tactical sense. Let me be perfectly blunt here. Had this horrific tragedy unfolded on the streets of Manhattan, my squad would have locked down that residence indefinitely. Yellow tape would have completely swallowed every inch of the surrounding land. A massive mobile command center would be permanently anchored right in the middle of the grass. Frankly, the absolute lack of systematic evidence gathering is shocking. I never witnessed a single coordinated grid sweep or methodical sector sweep. Watching searchers blindly stumble through the brush looked like a chaotic children's game. True professionals never approach a suspected murder zone with such careless abandon. Cadaver-sniffing canines should be tearing that soil apart. The total absence of tracking hounds at this stage is a glaring tactical failure. Officials boldly claimed animal units scoured the area during the initial response. However, canines is an incredibly vague term that deliberately obscures their specific training. The exact breed and specialization remain a total mystery to me. You likely have better intel regarding whether they deployed biters or sniffers. Regardless, expert tracking animals need to be reintroduced immediately. Let those specialized noses examine her sleepwear, lingering personal items, or any residual evidence to establish a fresh path. Watching the calendar flip while elementary forensic steps are blatantly ignored is deeply infuriating. This is policing 101. We are probably destined to never uncover the truth behind those rookie mistakes. Prematurely abandoning the primary incident zone remains my biggest grievance, especially since the grieving relatives were certainly not demanding immediate reentry. The rushed retreat from the property completely defies standard logic. Zero external forces were aggressively breathing down the department's neck to wrap things up. It remains a total head-scratcher. Based on the documented facts, absolutely no other living soul possessed legal residency rights to that specific dwelling. Nancy held exclusive domain over those four walls, giving her the sole constitutional protection against searches. Consequently, the boys in blue were essentially gifted an unrestricted playground. Securing judicial permission to tear the place apart was completely unnecessary under those specific circumstances. Executing a superficial sweep and promptly unlocking the front door for unauthorized foot traffic borders on professional negligence. Every seasoned detective furiously debates that specific decision. The entire property required a microscopic, deep clean, especially considering that bizarre visitor caught on tape. He blatantly tampered with the property. Underground waste systems suspiciously prodding the soil right before crimson stains magically appeared on the front porch. The protective latex handwear introduces a completely different layer of pure psychological horror. Discovering 16 distinct sets of surgical covers scattered about is an absolute investigator's worst nightmare. Searchers supposedly left those items behind, and then we magically discover rubber gloves another 2 miles down the road. What on earth are we even doing here, people? Nobody trains officers to mishandle evidence like that. Sure, there might not be a strict federal rulebook for managing a crime scene, but we possess mountains of established literature on the subject. The National Institute of Justice publishes comprehensive manuals detailing exactly how to manage these delicate situations. Industry experts have written countless textbooks covering these precise protocols. Honestly, witnessing this level of glaring incompetence in 2026 is completely unacceptable. You probably caught my recent report breaking down this entire mess. An inside source closely connected to the Silhouette investigation reached out, and I believe you actually tweeted about their core allegation. They revealed the lead supervisor possessed absolutely zero prior experience investigating actual homicides. I recall reading your social media post mentioning that specific detail did not really alarm you. You were basically arguing that a lack of direct experience was not an immediate deal breaker, right? Exactly, because a supervisor simply exists to ensure the field detectives possess all the necessary resources to effectively investigate the case. Back when I first became a sergeant in the detective squad, my lieutenant gave me some truly unforgettable advice. He looked right at me and ordered me to always give the investigating detectives plenty of breathing room. He told me my sole responsibility was securing their equipment and providing the essential tools they needed to succeed, then stepping entirely back. So you are completely correct about why I brushed off that specific detail earlier. A competent supervisor should always act as a strong manager, a supportive mentor, and a guiding trainer for the entire unit. They need to step into the briefing room and ask if the crew considered specific alternative angles. If the answer is no, they suggest actively trying that new route. That represents the true essence of what a competent supervisor should accomplish on a daily basis. Instead, wild rumors keep pouring in about leadership actively benching their lead homicide detectives and completely sidelining the only personnel who actually possess the required skill sets. Listen here, Brian, I am seriously wondering if anyone has bothered asking why they never formally requested mutual aid from Tucson or Phoenix. From day one, I would have been on the phone begging those neighboring jurisdictions for 5 seasoned homicide detectives to immediately assist. I would demand they arrive on site within 48 hours flat. I would gladly promise to foot the entire overtime bill just to get them deployed down here immediately. You must bring absolutely every available resource to bear because statistical data clearly proves this approach works. Throwing more specialized detectives at the initial phase of a case guarantees a much faster resolution. The operational math is incredibly simple and undeniably proven. Injecting all that combined experience and massive manpower was absolutely crucial during the critical early stages of this specific criminal investigation. Absolutely correct. Looking past the glaring supervisor issue, internal sources claim the current lead detectives possessed under 2 years of total experience. Apparently, the seasoned veterans were entirely transferred out of the homicide division due to petty personal grudges with the sheriff and ongoing election drama. The entire precinct environment suddenly becomes incredibly toxic and intensely political. I actually noticed that exact underlying dynamic the very second I arrived on the scene and began interviewing the local residents. These deeply rooted feuds with the sheriff have lingered for years, and they clearly contaminated the entire integrity of this current investigation. Furthermore, the complete public silence remains genuinely deafening regarding what outside observers actually know, whether authorities even bothered to question them, or how locals honestly perceive this disastrous situation. Listen closely, because investigators who have never caught a major homicide or handled a complex case will obviously never learn the ropes until they finally dive straight in. The primary goal involves pairing them with seasoned veterans who can smoothly guide them through the turbulent process. You still let the rookies actively work the case. We witnessed a remarkably similar dynamic unfold during the Moscow murders, where the lead detective essentially had 0 prior homicide experience. Exactly, and they successfully secured a massive arrest in that high-profile tragedy anyway. For anyone who has worked major cases before, the overall strategy remains incredibly clear. In New York City, we heavily train our detectives to solve complex homicides because those advanced skills perfectly translate into solving everyday lesser crimes. We actively prepared our force to solve the ultimate crime against society, ensuring they instinctively possess the necessary tools for any minor offense. That reality forces an entirely different conversation altogether. What exactly does their current training curriculum look like, and who formally oversees it? How frequently do they conduct this vital training, and has anyone on the current roster actually completed it? Those represent the immediate follow-up questions that any logical investigator would raise. I genuinely want to know if they possess a standard detective guidebook or clear procedural manuals for managing crime scenes, starting directly with the first uniformed patrolman. Pay close attention, because those initial uniformed responders frequently make or break entire cases. Do they properly lock down the perimeter? Did they spot any fleeing witnesses? Have they actively detained potential suspects, or did they happen to notice any subtle details looking completely out of place? Executing those vital initial steps perfectly is absolutely crucial when tackling a complicated mystery of this magnitude. I completely agree, especially since I covered the Moscow murders on the ground over in Idaho. The primary difference there was the local police department maintaining absolute radio silence. We remained completely in the dark regarding their behind-the-scenes operations, lacking any concrete updates from leadership. Nobody could tell if they were overwhelmed with solid leads or desperately grasping at thin air. However, regarding this current situation in Arizona with Nancy Guthrie, our internal sources are blatantly admitting that they possess absolutely nothing solid. They currently lack a primary suspect and are operating without a single promising investigative lead. The most recent intelligence suggests they are desperately canvassing every nearby neighborhood construction site, demanding comprehensive employee rosters from active building projects. They are blindly running down these massive lists, just hoping to systematically eliminate random laborers as potential targets, which is incredibly frustrating. Apparently, they are hitting massive operational roadblocks because the construction crews are terrified to surrender employee names, largely due to undocumented workers hiding out in the country. Those complex immigration issues create a massive logistical nightmare for local law enforcement. I would not explicitly call the department desperate just yet, but they are absolutely violently shaking the trees. It certainly appears like they are wildly grasping for anything. Whereas my time covering Idaho felt completely different because investigators actually possessed highly legitimate evidence hidden behind closed doors. They were secretly circling the wagons around Brian Koberger the entire time. The authorities simply refused to share those pivotal updates with the hungry press. Conversely, all current intelligence indicates the Arizona task force is not even close to cornering a valid suspect. I honestly share that exact same cynical sentiment, primarily because they are dangling over $1 million in reward money without generating a single credible public report. The only exception occurred during the chaotic early stages, and you actually covered that specific disaster where they prematurely announced having someone safely detained. They completely violated the ultimate cardinal rule by publicly broadcasting that they finally had a suspect sitting in lockup. Any rookie knows you never make that massive announcement until thoroughly vetting the intelligence and confirming the identity, because jumping the gun creates an absolute public relations nightmare. I sincerely wish the sheriff had immediately utilized a dedicated public information officer during those chaotic opening hours, a recurring leadership failure I keep witnessing lately. Whenever a massive tragedy drops, I expect to see the chief police executive actively commanding the actual crime scene. I want that leader physically directing the tactical operations, identifying crucial resource gaps, and seamlessly supplying the hardworking team with extra phones, fresh batteries, or hot meals to keep everyone successfully pushing forward. That represents the exact operational focus an executive should maintain rather than wasting precious time posing at a shiny press conference. Brian, firsthand that these massive investigations remain incredibly fluid and heavily pivot within minutes. Whenever the top boss makes a definitive public statement, the entire world permanently etches those words as undeniable facts. Even if the leader never intentionally lied to the public, accidentally broadcasting inaccurate details is fundamentally catastrophic. Who on earth holds the actual authority to publicly correct the ultimate boss? Nobody sits higher on the local chain, which perfectly highlights why professional media spokespersons must exist. A designated spokesperson allows higher-ranking officials to effortlessly step in later and gracefully correct course, clarifying that initial reports have significantly evolved as new evidence emerged. That simple protocol keeps the community informed while totally protecting the department. Instead, blatantly ignoring that strategy predictably transformed this entire situation into an unmitigated public disaster. That is a brilliantly insightful operational point. The sheriff could have effortlessly shielded his own personal reputation and heavily protected his long career. Deploying a specialized media representative creates a perfect buffer, allowing leadership to seamlessly blame faulty preliminary intelligence without taking direct political damage. The blame naturally falls onto the spokesperson, completely avoiding this current nightmare where the top official keeps fumbling facts and constantly contradicting his own official timeline. It leaves the terrified public questioning who they can genuinely trust. Now, regardless of what the sheriff officially announces or desperately attempts to clarify, absolutely nobody believes a single word he says. That massive credibility gap creates half of the current ongoing problem, highlighting exactly why professional media liaisons are absolutely mandatory. Listen, this unified incident management framework has remained the unquestioned gold standard since the September 11th attacks, clearly separating the primary commander from the specialized operational branches. One of those critically important branches exclusively handles public information, completely managed by a highly trained communications director. A very specific situation immediately comes to mind, though I cannot recall the exact jurisdiction right now. It involved a surprisingly tiny rural department getting brutally slammed by a massive high-profile felony case. They brilliantly requested a professional media coordinator from a neighboring metropolitan district to come instantly bail them out. That imported sergeant stepped right up to the hot microphones, flawlessly controlled the entire media narrative, and smoothly guided the whole chaotic situation to a perfectly successful conclusion. Law enforcement agencies invest massive amounts of time and financial resources specifically training these exact officers to expertly navigate heavily hostile press pools. Stepping up to those aggressively flashing cameras and delivering a completely coherent message under immense pressure is incredibly difficult, as you well know. Putting a highly trained specialist behind the podium makes perfect sense, whereas parading an untrained police executive who arrogantly overestimates their media skills usually ends in catastrophic false statements. Watching a trusted leader confidently deliver inaccurate updates immediately alienated the entire surrounding community. Naturally, this massive operational blunder triggered an avalanche of negative national attention directly aimed at his desk, and honestly, he completely deserves the harsh backlash. You actually mentioned the complex Idaho investigation earlier, and those guys successfully executed that exact same operational playbook. The local authorities wisely swallowed their pride and brought in the official Idaho State Police Communications Director to completely manage the massive media circus up in Moscow. Despite it remaining strictly a municipal investigation under the direct authority of the city of Moscow, they actively recruited an outside professional solely to intercept the overwhelming avalanche of press inquiries. As a result, the local chief probably conducted a grand total of 2 brief interviews during the entire grueling ordeal. Hearing directly from the local chief became an incredibly rare occurrence because he smartly allowed the communications expert to shoulder that entire heavy burden. That perfectly demonstrates exactly how a professional agency operates. We clearly possess the operational blueprint and the specialized training to prevent these modern disasters, right? Listen up. The Federal Emergency Management Agency takes point on this disaster. The blueprint for executing high-stakes operations is crystal clear, designed specifically to prevent these exact catastrophic blunders. Yet history repeated itself during that notorious fiasco at Brown University. We witnessed the exact same failure unfold after the Charlie Kirk gunfire incident. Far too many unauthorized individuals keep leaking highly sensitive details directly to the press, which paints a remarkably grim picture for the ultimate findings of this probe. Furthermore, running your mouth practically hands opposing counsel a loaded weapon to dismantle your entire argument in court. Let us not forget how a sharp legal representative operates when gearing up to argue. Clearly, my client is innocent, given that authorities supposedly cleared everyone else off. The board officers already dragged multiple suspects into custody during the initial sweep. Where did those potential culprits magically vanish to? Why did detectives let them walk free? Reckless public statements just invite devastating courtroom traps. Law enforcement must operate under the assumption of a brutal trial from the literal second a crime occurs. Every single detail requires flawless documentation, leaving absolutely zero room for error because that is the only acceptable standard for justice. Massive gaps still exist within the timeline, and we have not unpacked this specific mystery together before. Consequently, my curiosity is genuinely piqued. What is your prevailing hypothesis? Given the limited facts currently available to the public, what do you suspect drove this entire terrifying ordeal? Endless rumors are flying around as armchair detectives toss out wild guesses by the dozen. However, looking at the raw evidence, a distinct narrative emerges in my mind. The victim was absolutely not singled out for a premeditated hit. Instead, the perpetrator likely orchestrated a standard break-in that suddenly spiraled into complete chaos. What makes me so certain this was a random strike rather than an assassination? Just pay attention. Observe the intruder's bizarre method for disabling the surveillance equipment, correct? Obscuring the lens with floral arrangements is completely ridiculous. The suspect moved at a leisurely pace, displaying virtually zero urgency or panic throughout the footage. From day one, my professional assessment concluded we are dealing with a total rookie. My justification stems entirely from his glaring lack of tactical readiness. Critics will inevitably challenge my stance by arguing, "Come on, Joseph, an incompetent fool could not evade capture for 60 days. To that I say, criminals consistently leave breadcrumbs. Detectives bear the ultimate responsibility of identifying and exploiting those subtle slip-ups. Statistically speaking, the vast majority of home invasions begin at the main entrance. Naturally, the thief planned to breach the primary threshold initially. Did the actual infiltration occur via the rear access point? Current reports suggest the criminal shifted strategies to the backyard. Inside resided an 84-year-old mobility-impaired citizen relying on cardiac tracking equipment alongside serious medical dependencies. Selecting her for a calculated strike makes zero tactical sense given the astronomical probability of her suffering a fatal medical emergency. Suddenly, the assailant faces capital homicide indictments instead of petty theft. Yet if this was merely a botched robbery, what explains his prior presence on the property? Keep in mind, evidence places him at the scene on January 11th, exactly 21 days prior to the tragedy. Was the culprit actively conducting surveillance? Absolutely, he was thoroughly casing the perimeter. The prowler diligently studied the location. Monitoring environmental variables was his priority. Perhaps he tracked her weekly habits, realizing she vacated the premises every single Sunday for personal errands. Consequently, the crime occurred on the Sabbath. Did the incident deliberately align with a weekend absence to exploit her schedule? Approaching the puzzle from an intelligence-gathering angle provides a solid foundation. Furthermore, I mentioned off-air that introducing extortion letters dramatically escalates the stakes. Detectives must immediately elevate their operational scope to handle complex new threats. Shifting gears becomes mandatory when juggling triple inquiries, extortion demands, unknown assailant, kidnapping, and domestic scrutiny. Inner circles inevitably face intense interrogation during these crises. Despite public skepticism, statistics overwhelmingly prove perpetrators possess prior relationships with their targets, making familial connections a primary focus. While relatives might be innocent, detectives carry the burden of officially eliminating them from the suspect pool. Elimination remains the ultimate objective. Clearing the immediate relatives allows the squad to redirect resources toward fresh leads. Systematically crossing names off the list is vital. My insistence on interrogating incarcerated individuals stems from a gut feeling that this offender boasts a prolific criminal history involving similar property crimes. Distribute the suspect images throughout the cell blocks. Broadcast the surveillance footage, especially since the perpetrator exhibited a highly distinctive limp. Hauling around an excessively burdened rucksack clearly threw off his center of gravity. The suspect visibly struggled to remain upright during the getaway. An observant inmate might recognize that peculiar walking pattern. Any clue is valuable. Sitting on your hands yields nothing. Aggressive tactics produce results. A frequent guest of mine, former Federal Bureau of Investigation operative Maureen O'Connell, analyzed that same strange stride. Her professional assessment points toward heavy narcotic influence. In her expert opinion, the assailant was undeniably intoxicated during the break-in. Substance abuse is entirely plausible. Word easily spreads around rough neighborhoods regarding vulnerable seniors living alone. Addicts desperately searching for their next fix often assume elderly residents stockpile highly sought-after prescription pharmaceuticals indoors. Physical currency is another huge draw. Aging generations famously hoard paper bills safely stashed away under mattresses. Consequently, these quiet suburban homes transform into highly lucrative gold mines for desperate junkies. Obviously, my assertions remain speculative without reviewing the classified case files. This hypothesis serves purely as a starting framework. Brainstorming sessions like these occur behind closed doors during every major probe. Seasoned investigators gather around conference tables to spitball ideas and dissect the evidence. Teams map out multiple possible sequences of events before letting forensic data dictate the true path. Perhaps you can illuminate a crucial detail that keeps gnawing at my brain, Brian. I continually demand clarity on one specific aspect, yet the authorities remain dead silent. Did the property contain an internet hub, and did the suspect intentionally steal it? This specific detail is absolutely monumental. Every single visitor, from distant relatives to random maintenance workers, automatically links their cellular devices to the local network. That humble modem secretly acts as an indestructible digital guestbook, tracking every arrival. Deliberate login attempts are not even required. Walking past a broadcasting signal triggers automatic background pings. Your pocket device eagerly searches for available networks constantly. The hardware logs unique identifiers from smartwatches and cellular devices instantly. Skeptics might quickly counter my theory by pointing out the kidnapper forced the victim to abandon her smart accessories before fleeing. Precisely because modern criminals understand how effortlessly police track GPS coordinates. Savvy street thugs instinctively discard electronics to avoid an immediate tactical response. Sadly, sophisticated technological awareness is standard among today's underworld. Do you predict a swift conclusion to this nightmare? Absolutely not. Had you posed that inquiry during the initial 14 days, my optimism would have been sky high. Seeing Federal Bureau of Investigation agents swoop into town gave me tremendous confidence, especially considering the local agency is hardly a tiny operation. Civilians mistakenly assume this precinct operates like a rural backward patrol. Reality proves they employ 500 sworn officers compared to the 18,000 precincts nationwide. Their massive roster dwarfs typical jurisdictions that barely scrape together 20 active badges. Despite possessing substantial local manpower, federal resources offer unparalleled forensic capabilities. Honestly, inviting the Secret Service onto the task force would have been incredibly brilliant. Their elite digital forensics units possess groundbreaking cellular extraction capabilities that run circles around standard police equipment. Similarly, involving the Drug Enforcement Administration could expose cross-border cartel ties. Exploiting every possible governmental alliance seems like an absolute necessity. Perhaps the lead detective simply suffered from tunnel vision and ignored these vital multi-agency collaborations. Who truly knows, claiming ultimate authority or infallible detective skills is certainly not my intention here. However, my strategic instincts kick in automatically. After 14 years away from the badge, my mind still violently attacks puzzles with the exact same intensity as a rookie. My immediate action plan would execute these exact protocols without hesitation. Indeed, your assessment hits the nail on the head. Outsiders foolishly visualize a sleepy countryside outpost, ignoring the 400 deputies actively patrolling. Exactly dismissing their manpower is a massive mistake. Tucson represents a sprawling metropolis rather than a forgotten desert village. Shifting back to the extortion letters, how do seasoned professionals verify the authenticity of a kidnapper's demands? Establishing an irrefutable private communication channel with the relatives is paramount. Extortionists crave quick payouts. Generating a massive public spectacle completely contradicts the standard operational playbook for these criminals. Successful ransoms demand absolute secrecy between the hostage takers, the devastated relatives, and undercover operatives. The perpetrators strive to coordinate a seamless financial exchange. Their ultimate fantasy involves releasing the captives safely while vanishing into the shadows undetected with the cash. Therefore, triggering a massive nationwide media frenzy strikes me as profoundly counterproductive in every conceivable way. Plastering the victim's face across cable news completely destroys the delicate negotiation process. Maintaining a strict media blackout remains the absolute gold standard for securing a peaceful resolution. Triggering a massive Federal Bureau of Investigation response is a criminal's absolute worst nightmare. Lawbreakers avoid federal heat at all costs. Period. Joseph Weiss, I'm incredibly grateful for your brilliant insights today. Your expertise helped untangle this massively convoluted string of fresh updates. Before signing off, several crucial updates recently surfaced that require your immediate attention. These explosive revelations directly target the highly controversial actions of Sheriff Nanos. Recall that Pima County officials launched a ferocious internal inquiry into the top cop's conduct. A massive scandal erupted over accusations of perjury. He swore under oath that his disciplinary record was flawless, yet deeply buried files from his El Paso days decades ago revealed multiple severe suspensions. Consequently, county executives retained high-powered outside counsel to dissect his deeply troubling administrative history. Furthermore, explosive ethics complaints recently materialized regarding his brutal campaign tactics. These shady political maneuvers targeted Heather Lapin, his electoral rival, and a former colleague within the exact same precinct. Explosive claims just dropped. They say he intentionally targeted her right before voters hit the polls, sparking massive election interference rumors. Now check out this. Fresh paperwork just hit the desk, revealing 3 separate bullying probes against him. Investigators claimed they lacked solid proof for intimidation, but they absolutely confirmed 2 massive ethical violations. Solid proof confirms Sheriff Nanos weaponized his power and department resources for political leverage. The findings show he directly targeted Lieutenant Lapin's rival campaign through his questionable disciplinary choices, ending with a press drop packed with privileged sheriff intel. They totally validated the ethics breach, confirming he deliberately leaked this strategic statement right before voting day to smear a female subordinate challenging his seat. That brings us straight to the severe code of conduct violations. Authorities determined Nanos broke standard behavioral rules by weaponizing classified details in his public statement, exposing exactly why he forced Lieutenant Lapin onto paid leave just to score political points. He completely ignored basic standards of professional respect, so that charge definitely stuck. The report confirmed his behavior blatantly violated protocol. But here is the catch: elected officials mysteriously remain immune. Ultimately, his elected status provides a massive shield, meaning committees can write all the reports they want without actually having the power to fire him. Only the voters hold the actual authority to oust him. Meanwhile, that massive recall effort I mentioned previously is quietly gaining momentum, with organizers scrambling for enough signatures to force an emergency election. The guy is essentially dodging heavy fire from every conceivable angle. To make matters crazier, a fresh Fox Digital report dropped this weekend claiming he actually carried a loaded firearm straight into an airport checkpoint. I literally have the file right here documenting the armed breach. Security found it stashed inside his carry-on luggage. Miraculously dodging criminal charges, authorities simply ordered him to lock up the weapon before flying. Honestly, any average citizen pulling that stunt would face massive fines or immediate jail time. It seems his shiny badge earned him a free pass, but trying to board a commercial flight packed with live ammo remains absolutely wild. That wraps up today's top headlines, though. I have a few more explosive investigations brewing for later this week. Thank you all so incredibly much for continually tuning in and supporting this channel's mission. We are now hitting day 65 since Nancy Guthrie mysteriously disappeared from her Tucson residence. I am desperately holding on to hope that crucial answers will surface soon, preferably before this nightmare stretches on much longer. Sending massive love out to the entire Guthrie family, especially considering how brutal returning to normal work routines must feel for Banna right now. I will absolutely drop an update the second new details emerge, so stay tuned. In moments of fear and confusion, the true measure of a community is not how loudly it reacts, but how deeply it cares. This story reminds us that when tragedy strikes, people are tested in ways the world may never fully understand. Behind every headline is a family carrying heartbreak, uncertainty, and the exhausting weight of hope. What stands out most is resilience. Even in the middle of pain, there is courage in showing up and continuing life, and in refusing to let darkness define the future. Strength does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed, returning to work, speaking kindly, and holding on when answers still have not come. There is also an important lesson about truth. In times of crisis, rumors spread fast, and sensational voices often grow louder than honest ones. That is why integrity matters. We must choose compassion over curiosity, facts over gossip, and support over spectacle. Most of all, this is a reminder to value human life, stand with those who are suffering, and never become numb to another person's pain. When we respond with empathy, patience, and unity, we prove that even in the darkest hours, humanity still shines.